The 49ers have a very big decision on Deebo Samuel coming up. What will that decision tell us about the Niners and about Kyle Shanahan himself? We'll break it all down next. What is good, everybody? Welcome to Under Review on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. That man with that glorious beard is Vish Kumar. And Vish, how are you on a Super Bowl Monday?
I'm mixed. I was happy that the Chiefs lost, but I was not happy that the Eagles won.
I was rooting for the Chiefs going into the game because I just didn't want to see the Eagles win the championship. But then once Philly started to utterly beat them down, I got to admit, I was enjoying it. I was enjoying watching the Chiefs not be able to do all of the Chief things, Vish.
I thought it was very un-New England of them for all the New England comparisons to not have a counterpunch that entire game. Whether it was Mahomes, whether it was Reed, they had nothing for them. Nothing.
You know, Kyle Posey had some great tweets after the game, and he's right. I didn't think to compare them right away, but the 49ers did to the Chiefs in the first half of their Super Bowl exactly what the Eagles did to the Chiefs last night. The Chiefs scored on their 9th possession last night. The 49ers against the Chiefs last year, the Chiefs scored on their 10th possession. The difference was not what the Chiefs offense did. The difference in the Super Bowls was the Eagles scored off of every missed Chiefs opportunity, and the Niners only scored 10 points in the first half. That was the difference in the game.
Oh my God. I'm so upset with you. When Kyle Posey says it, you read it and you listen. But go watch after the game the shows I did with you. When everybody was worried about what happened at the end of the game, my takeaway from the game was you're not going to beat the Chiefs if you get locked into a possession by possession ball game with them. I kept pointing out that the 49ers didn't take advantage of their opportunities in the first half because that's what Tampa did to them. That's the only way you can beat them, especially without Tyreek Hill. They don't run down leads anymore. That was their thing with Tyreek Hill. They don't do that anymore. You got to take your chance when you get it, because once it gets into the back and forth one possession ball game with Mahomes, you are going to lose, especially with the new rules. There's no shot for you. You're going to lose. I'm so upset. I've been saying this. It was going to be a point I was going to make on the show. Notice, Rob, all that. But when Kyle Posey tweets it, Rob sees it. Rob announces it. Wow. But Kyle deserves it. Kyle rocks.
First of all, we're going to get to the Deebo Samuel stuff in a second. I just want to make sure I'm clear as to what's going on here. Are you right now mad at me for not remembering a take that you had a year ago? Is that where we are?
Well, I mean, it would have been nice. I mean, okay, yeah, KP's the best. Give KP credit for his tweets, but then be like, I remember Vish was also saying the same thing after the Niners Super Bowl, especially when everybody was so focused on, did he know the overtime rules or not? Whether he knew the overtime rules or not, back and forth when that one possession ball game, they were losing to Patrick Mahomes because everybody loses to Patrick Mahomes in a one possession ball game.
It was a beatdown of the Chiefs last night. A historically good performance by former 49ers coordinator Vic Fangio and his defense. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. All right. That's enough talk about that because it's officially the offseason. We have offseason issues to talk about, Vish, and no 49ers offseason issue or offseason would be complete without a wide receiver causing drama for the team. In this case, it's Deebo Samuel. You all know by now he put in his trade request. He wants to be traded and out of San Francisco. It basically boils down to a couple things. The Niners have three options. They could trade him, they could cut him, and they could keep him. This we all know. If they trade him or cut him before June 1st, they take the entire $31.5 million salary cap hit this season, and then he is off the books, free and clear after that. If they do a post-June 1st cut or a post-June 1st trade, they can split the cap hit out over multiple seasons. But they have to pay out this money because they've already paid him. It has to go on the cap. It's just a matter of when and how the 49ers want to do it. So, Fish, you are a very smart man. I tend to defer to you on various things, especially when it comes to 49ers decision-making. I put it to you, sir. What would you do with Deebo Samuel?
I have a quick question. I'm not always 100% sure of this, but can the 49ers package like, hey, you pay part of his cap as the deal? Like
I
this
don't.
$20 million that they owe him before June 1st.
So yeah, he has an option bonus due on March 22nd. If they move him before then, they're not on the hook for that.
Okay, so I mean, the idea is going to be to move him before then. That's obvious. They're not going to want to pay him that, especially with him not being on the roster. I think they got to trade him. That's obvious. Um,
And take all the
I
cap.
think they're right, and I think they're in a position to be trading him. Um, you've got two options. You might get a better pick if you take all the cap hit, but if you have the option to unload some of the cap hit, you might have to give up something with Deebo, get something okay in return, but alleviate Deebo from your cap because you don't want that $20 million pre June 1st on your cap. I think that's basically what's going to happen, right? One of those two things is going to be the deal for him. I For me, this isn't really fascinating because I wanted them to get rid of Deebo this offseason. I felt like it was time to get rid of Deebo. I thought it was going to happen one way or another with the emergence of Pearsall, Jennings' role, especially how much they've paid Ayuk. Deebo doesn't really have a role for the contract that they were going to pay him. It didn't make sense for them to keep him. The bigger question and the more fascinating part of this to me is what did you think of the fact that Deebo himself requested a trade? Is it Deebo seeing the writing on the wall and trying to be proactive about the business? Is it Deebo being unhappy with the 49ers? What did you think of all of that?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Bish. If you will allow me to play you an excerpt from Tim Kawakami's Plus Minus podcast, that might answer some of the questions you just asked. So this is Tim Kawakami on his Deebo Samuel 49ers Plus Minus reaction podcast.
I will say, I've heard this a little while ago. I don't think this is the 49ers taking shots at Deebo as he goes out. I heard this, and I've held it back just because I wasn't sure when to say it, but I've heard very clearly from someone who is aware of the 49ers situation that Deebo, in their opinion, got too heavy last year, and it was 20 pounds overweight at the end. That's what I was told, 20 pounds overweight at the end. He did get dinged up. There probably were reasons for it. I think there is some opinion in the 49ers that they do not need to be in the Deebo business anymore. But, could they bring him back at a lower salary because Kyle really wants it? Yes, I do think that's possible. But I do think they still consider, at least John and Kyle still consider him a very valuable player. I think maybe other people in the front office do not consider him very valuable. They haven't considered him that value for a year or two.
I think what happened is the 49ers went to Deebo and said, we want you to take a pay cut next year. And Deebo said, F that. I want out. And then this is his way of getting in front of that, right? It's not going to be a Kyle Juszczyk situation. You're not doing that to me. Nope, I'm not doing that. Trade me. I'm out. They just traded Eric Armstead when they asked him to do it. I think that's exactly what's happening now.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair estimation of all of that. Do you want to react to all of what Tim said, starting with the weight stuff? So
Sure.
I think the weight stuff was pretty clear. In the offseason when he got hurt, he had like an injury before the season that had him out of practice for a couple weeks. And Skinny Deebo, as he was coined, like Barry Bonds, Skinny Barry, Skinny Deebo was gone. He looked like Deebo. And then he picked up pneumonia over the course of the season. And, that's a hard thing to deal with. And I'm sure it affected his ability to do cardio. And so Deebo Samuel, clearly, when he has idle time, he's one of those athletes. He has the Zion Williamson, the Joel Embiid. He tends to put on weight. It was something Will Muschamp warned the 49ers about Deebo Samuel before they got him out of South Carolina. And it's something Wes Welker seemingly had under control. And I point that out to say, what is Leonard Hankerson's role in all of this? Now, part of this is Deebo dealt with things during the season, and Deebo needs to be a professional, one, and stay in shape. Two, he might have dealt with things that have prevented him being in shape. But this is 3 for 3 in seasons since Deebo got his contract, since Wes Welker left, of Deebo being out of shape. And I wonder, because Leonard Hankerson was the quality control and he kind of joined as Deebo was a rookie. I wonder if him and Deebo are more friends than more of a Wes Welker in his grill, making him run and running with him after practice. I'm tired of going after position coaches on our show, Rob. I went after Chris Kocurek last week, but here's me coming at Leonard Hankerson out of nowhere. But that's my first immediate question when I think of Deebo being 3 for 3 on season since he got his contract of not being in shape. Why is he not held accountable for it?
Well, so Matt Barrows kind of elaborated in the podcast. He said basically the initial target weight for Deebo was 212. That's what he was around. That's what they wanted him at. He was pretty successful his rookie year around there. And then he couldn't get down to 212. Like, he could not do it. So they put it at around 220. They were like, all right, do 220. Barrows said Welker used to run with Deebo before practice. He would run with Deebo after practice every single day. That's what they were doing. And even with all that effort and all that work, they still were having trouble with the weight situation. I don't know if that changed after Wes Welker left. I have no idea. I'm just relaying what Matt Barrows said on the podcast. It's crazy to me that he was potentially around 20 pounds overweight last year. And he's got the gall to sit there and say, oh, I'm not struggling because I'm not getting my opportunities. No, dude. You know you're way more than you're supposed to. You know, but he couldn't admit it to himself.
That's the athletic ego inside of him, right? And I think that brings us to the second part of the conversation of what is Deebo's value at this point. I think Deebo, he still has his moments, right? We can see his run after the catch is unique. It's special. He's a unique player with the ball in his hands. But I think the main...
It wasn't special last year after the catch.
He was hurt at points last year, but we saw at the end of last year in the Miami game and all of it, there's still something there. If you want to project, well, I'm talking about projecting it going into next year, Rob. It's still available as a skill set, and you're projecting him as a trade asset. It's the skill set that people are going to trade for. The question to me, and what I find fascinating in the Deebo conversation is, okay, like, this is his skill set. I just completely lost my train of thought. Thanks, Rob.
No problem. Happy to do it. Happens once a show.
Yeah, I know. My bad.
That's the situation with Deebo Samuel. I put out a YouTube short earlier today about 3 possible destinations. Okay, you got it?
You want to go back there?
No, we'll go back to my short later. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, okay. What I was going to say was we were talking about how Barrows and Kawakami, the second part of it is like Deebo's value, right? Why the 49ers would keep him. And this is where I think Kyle Shanahan needs to get over it and get out of it. They're too into the guys that they think established the culture for the first iteration of this team, and they still think they need that in order to build the second iteration of this team. And Deebo is one of those guys. I've talked about it. I used to call him the most important player on this offense. And it wasn't because schematically they needed him to do everything, right? The quarterback first and foremost is more important than Deebo. It was just that when he played and when he ran with the ball and how tough he was, there was an inherent intangible value to the fact that it rubbed off on his teammates. Everybody played tougher. Everybody wanted to run with the ball. It rubbed off. He had a great intangible leadership effect. He had a swagger, a confidence that was the identity of the team. I think that's gone because I don't think he's that good of a player to even be that kind of player anymore. And I don't think the 49ers need that identity, Rob. I think that it's time for a new identity. It's time to let someone else establish the new identity of this team. Deebo Samuel came in as a rookie and seized an opportunity to become that kind of player with the 49ers. Open it up. Take the chance of coming into the season and giving somebody else the opportunity to become that heart and soul, that intangible leader. One of these young guys is ready to do it, Rob. Give him a chance. Don't the business of Deebo Samuel anymore. There's no reason. There's no reason. He's not going to give you that intangible value, and it's not worth it at that dollar, and it's not worth it because of what he brings on the field.
Not one of these young guys, Fish. It's not one of these young guys. It's got to be Brock. It's got to be the quarterback. The only reason Deebo Samuel was able to be that guy is because the 49ers didn't have a guy at quarterback. They had Jimmy G, who just wanted to be one of the guys and put in his 9 to 5 and clock out and not think about football again. That's the only reason. Like this first iteration of the 49ers is so bizarre in that their quarterback was clearly not the leader of the team. That it's got to be the quarterback. It has to be.
Yeah, I think I didn't mean it in that sense. Like, I understand what you mean, and the quarterback has to be that for sure, like 100%. And you're right. They didn't have it in the first iteration, but I meant more so of Brock's Brady, somebody who gives that like Gronk effect. When Gronk gets the ball and he runs with it, the uplifting of the team and all that. I'm not sure that Brock could have a play that uplifts the team to run with the ball, that kind of infectious energy like that. You can make that face, Rob, but it's a real thing. That's why they want to keep Deebo. His energy, the way he runs with the ball, his swagger, it rubs off on the team. It gives them confidence.
If you're good, you don't have to worry about that. People were not scared of the Patriots because they were scared about Gronk. They were scared of Brady, man. They were scared
the energy he gives the crowd, the stadium.
Brady gives the energy because he's the greatest goddamn quarterback of all time. Like, it's the quarterback, man. It is. Forget this. Who's going to charge up the team crap? If you have a good quarterback, you don't need that. You don't. And you shouldn't keep a guy that sucks just because you're worried about not having it.
Home field advantage is a thing in sports, Rob. You need players who can get the crowd going, players who get the crowd up. Sometimes it's not the quarterback that does that. That's why Brady needed a Gronk. Gronk was a great player too. Of course you need the quarterback.
Who's that guy for the Bills?
That's why they haven't won. They need that. And they have Superman at quarterback. 49ers don't have Superman. He's not Superman, Rob.
The Bills are a great team because they have a great quarterback. They don't worry about having to pump up the crowd. Josh Allen pumps up the crowd when he makes an alien play.
He's one of one.
He makes an alien play. What about the Ravens? Lamar pumps up the crowd when he makes these crazy plays.
He's another one of one, Rob. He's not there on the 49ers. We're talking about the 49ers and what they need to do. They have Brock Purdy. That's their quarterback. Yeah, they don't have Lamar Jackson.
It's got to be Brock. You don't keep Deebo because you're worried about
the crowd. He's not Lamar. He's not Josh Allen.
If they win, the crowd will cheer. Give me a break with this. This is the craziest argument of all time.
I don't know what you're arguing with because I never said keep Deebo. I also said they need somebody to fill the role of what he brings. And then 3, you're bringing up quarterbacks that they don't have. Brock Purdy is not going to be able to do what Lamar does. He's not going to be able to do what Josh Allen does. He doesn't have their skill set.
The point is you can be good without it. You don't need that to be good. You don't need what this whole, you know why the crowd got pumped up?
Well, you played the clip where Tim Kawakami said why John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan might want to keep him at a lower salary.
Yeah,
this would be the reason why they would want to keep him, right?
And that's a dumb reason is what I'm telling you. That's a dumb reason. It's a really dumb reason. You don't spend salary cap dollars.
Then what's the reason on why they would want to keep him?
No, that may be the reason. I'm not saying it's not the reason. I'm saying it's a dumb reason to keep him. You don't keep a guy that's
That's fair. I agree with that too. I don't think it makes sense at all. I'm with that.
He's not good and he's expensive. That's a terrible combination. So
yeah.
But I mean, even if that's the argument, Kittle does the exact same thing. If your argument is you need a guy that gets the team charged up, George Kittle does that. Clearly.
I agree with that.
So like,
I think they just believe there's something about Deebo that Kyle believes in, that football toughness. I've only seen him talk about Dre Greenlaw and Jimmy Ward the way he talks about Deebo. And I think it's their toughness. I don't know what it is. You watch the Greg Papa interviews, you can see it in his being when he's talking about those 3 guys. There's something different. There's an admiration. There's a love. What's your psychoanalysis tell you on it? I don't get that.
No, I agree. I think Deebo, Kawakami said it in the podcast, and I think you can sell it. Kyle has talked about it. I think Deebo is Kyle's favorite player. I think because of what Deebo brings, the versatility, because of that, the effect that he does have on teammates. And I think Kyle just likes that idea of being able to manipulate things. I think he likes Deebo as a person. I think it's all of that, which is why this decision is a referendum on Kyle Shanahan as well, because there is no reason to keep him, Vish. And if Kyle's answer is we're just going to run it back again, after running it back in 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and 2023 and 2024, If his answer is we just got to try again and run it back again, that's a massive, massive referendum on Kyle Shanahan and a huge, huge, huge red flag.
Agreed. And the business move, man. Like, a lot of people questioned taking a wide receiver last year. I was one of the people who defended the pick. I liked Ricky Pearsall. I thought he would be a great compliment for Brandon Ayuk. I thought it was because you're going to unload Deebo Samuel, and now you have this excellent young wide receiver core. And at that point, we thought a healthy Brandon Ayuk. Hopefully he comes back and is fully healthy. Pearsall and Jennings. So none of those things make sense if you keep Deebo Samuel in 2025. And the restructure of him last year, Rob, was a weird move.
No sense.
Right? They did it. My best guess of the restructure, and this is how I can justify it from the 49ers terms, is that they didn't want him making that much money for the role that he was going to play in 2024.
But why? Who cares?
Right? Why are you doing it for next year? Because if that's the case, then just stomach it for 1 year and get rid of him.
Right. You're paying for flexibility. You're at that point, you're paying for the option to get rid of him. That's what you really want. And it's weird. And Barrows pointed this out on the podcast too. And I said at the time, when Deebo signed, because remember, Torrey Dandy had multiple wide receivers that were clients that all got new deals. AJ Brown got a 4-year deal. McLaurin got a 4-year deal. Deebo Samuel got a 3-year deal. And that is because the 49ers knew this is not a player that is going to age well. We know he's not going to age well. We know this style of play is extremely physical. We know the weight issues we've had with him. If he loses a little speed, combined with the fact that he has trouble keeping off weight, he's not going to age well. So we're not going to be in the Deebo Samuel business for a long period of time. That's why they went 3 years instead of 4. It seemed like they recognized all of this stuff that we're talking about. And yet they extended him in September. Or they restructured rather in September. And it was like, what? You just blew all that. You wasted all of that.
No, you're right. You're right. And that's the same way I feel about it. And I don't think my reason actually made much sense. So let's try and forget my reason, everybody listening to the podcast, because Brett Davis in the comments, I think, actually makes a little better sense of why they wanted to restructure Deebo. And I think it might have been to carry over cap and open it up for this year.
But so they wanted to carry over the cap space so they would have the cap space to release him now? Like that, why not just not do the restructure and then he's off?
That's the part of it that's bizarre, Rob, because if you think about the fact that they restructured him to carry over the cap space, that means that Shanahan restructured him not with the intention of getting rid of him, which means they drafted Ricky Pearsall not thinking they were going to get rid of Deebo Samuel at all.
I think that maybe they drafted Ricky Pearsall thinking they were going to get rid of Brandon Ayuk.
Really? But they didn't trade Brandon Ayuk that day. So
they wanted to trade him. Here's what I think happened. If I had to make a guess.
We go.
I think that there's a split with the 49ers. I think it's like maybe Jed and Parag and maybe Lynch. I don't know where Lynch comes down in this. And then there's Kyle. And I think that the front office wanted to get rid of Deebo after the 3 years. That's why they signed him to a 3-year deal. Kyle didn't want to get rid of Deebo. Kyle loves Deebo. I think Kyle wanted to stay in the Deebo Samuel business. And then Brandon Ayuk started this whole thing up. And I think that they were like, all right, we're going to trade Brandon Ayuk. It's not working out. We tried our best, whatever. And then I think at the 11th hour, the combination of Brandon Ayuk not totally being sure and Kyle ultimately wanting to keep Brandon Ayuk, I think Kyle went to the team and said, I really need this guy to get it done. And I think Jed and Parag said, okay, Kyle, we'll do it. And then they got Brandon Ayuk. I think that Kyle, credit to the ownership for like listening to your head coach. I do like that ultimately, but I think that Kyle has I think that Kyle, the GM, is Kyle, the head coach's worst enemy.
Okay, so I kind of agree with your timeline, but OKM30 in the chat also brings up what I was going to say, was if you remember, after they drafted Pearsall, there was early rumors the second day of the draft that they might trade Deebo for one of those picks in the 30 in the early part of the second round with New England. I think they were saying whatever. And then it came out that they weren't going to trade Deebo. And then we went into the offseason. So what I think happened is I kind of agree with your first part of the story that originally they were trying to trade Ayuk. Then they were unable to trade Ayuk. Same reasons as what you said. They drafted Pearsall. Then I think when they drafted Pearsall, they thought maybe we can unload Deebo. They didn't get the right deal for Deebo. But then Deebo showed up to shape in the first part of camp. And then I agree with your part. I think Kyle changed his mind. The entire Brandon Ayuk situation made them restructure Deebo, thinking, let's get rid of Ayuk. We have Pearsall, Deebo. Exactly. I think that's how it fits together.
Well, that's
agreed.
a front, that's a team with running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like, you
I-
got to have a plan and you got to execute the plan. Like, what are we doing there?
And right, and that's the second part of this that, like, you're absolutely right. There's a certain point that when we talk through some of these situations and all of it, I feel like we're losing all the parts of Kyle Shanahan that I originally was so excited for. And me as a fan is thinking that maybe getting fired would be good for him, because I feel like we've gone to the point where he's had a level of success. He's this close to a Super Bowl, but he hasn't tasted it yet. And now he's just making decisions by the whims of his mood. Like that entire Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall sequence, to us as fans, with the information we digested, that's how we're piecing together that it came across. I'm sure there's a lot more to the full story, but it doesn't come across like a guy who's well thought out, like an organization that has a clear sense of direction and all of that. A lot of the moves they made this offseason didn't come well thought out or anything like that. To me, it's a lot of emotional. How do we get there quickly? How do we cut this corner? It's Kyle Shanahan. I feel like he's running this team on his emotions, and I think a reset might do him good. And it's like the craziest thing I could say, right? Because I don't want the 49ers to fire Kyle Shanahan. But I don't know that Kyle Shanahan will be the best version of Kyle Shanahan at this point, the way he's making decisions with this team, if he doesn't get fired.
Here is the question. Does this sort of remind you back to when the 49ers were trying to get Matthew Stafford? They don't get Matthew Stafford. Like, I should even go back before that. Kyle decides, I got to get out of the Garoppolo business. Like, this is not working. We need a new plan. Let's go get Matthew Stafford. Okay, we think we're in talks with Matthew Stafford. Oh, wait, all of a sudden, Sean McVay's staying at the same resort as him, and whoosh, the Rams pull the rug out from under the 49ers and steal Matthew Stafford. Now, the 49ers plan at quarterback is gone. And not only is it gone, it's gone to a division rival. So what do the 49ers do? Oh, my God, we got to get a quarterback. Let's trade 3 first-round picks for, I don't know, somebody, whoever will be there at number 3. That's who we'll take. And then, okay, it's going to be Mac Jones. Oh, wait, it's not going to be Mac Jones. I'm going to let somebody talk me out of the guy that I think should be the pick, and we're going to go with somebody else. And then, okay, now I've got somebody else. And, okay, he's in camp, and he looks really good. Oh, wait, now he doesn't look really good. Holy crap, we can't go with him. Now we got to go back to Jimmy Garoppolo. We got to play Jimmy Garoppolo against the Cowboys with one friggin' hand because he's got all torn ligaments, but we can't go to Trey Lance. I almost think that this is kind of the same thing, right? Like, making decisions emotionally, and then when things don't go as planned, not being able to handle the circumstances as they arise.
Right. But I think it's okay if he does it once. He's a 40-year-old head coach. You would hope that the first time he goes through it, the first time he trades 3 ones, he would be able to learn from it and all of that. I think that's really what I'm addressing as the bigger issue. Like when I say get rid of Kyle Shanahan, like he's way too good a coach to just say, oh, get rid of Kyle Shanahan. He's a great coach. I love Kyle Shanahan. But I also don't feel like the things that have detracted from him being, should I say, the perfect head coach, which doesn't exist, I don't feel like he's improving on those things, Rob. And I feel like in some ways he's plateaued in what he does really well. And we've realized, which is okay, because what he does really well makes him one of the 6, 7, 8 best head coaches in the NFL, top 5, if you want to be generous. He's a really good head coach. But what he doesn't do well are the little things that have prevented him from winning a Super Bowl. And he feels like he just keeps repeating the same mistakes over and over again. In fact, I feel like it's getting worse. I feel like he's getting worse at the things he does bad, like making emotional decisions, not moving off of people he needs to move off of, not understanding value.
To be fair, They got rid of Nick Sorensen this offseason. They got rid of Brian Schneider this offseason. They seem to have made upgrades at both spots. Robert Saleh is clearly an upgrade. It's not even close. It seems like Brian Boyer would have to be an upgrade because the special team, or Brant Boyer, excuse me, would have to be an upgrade because the special teams were so god awful.
That's what they said about Brian Schneider. Go look up the stats they shared about how good he was with Pete Carroll in Seattle when they hired him.
Maybe, but was he better than Richard Hightower? That's the question. Honestly,
Richard Hightower had a good special teams. That's why he stayed on, right? He had a good special teams in 2017, I want to say.
Yeah, that 1 year he did have a good special team.
He had a good special teams, but he was Kyle's college buddy.
After that, it went downhill. Yeah. Well, my point in all this is saying,
my bad, I didn't mean to derail that.
They do seem to be making some changes, right? So it's not like they're just refusing to do anything and they're like, no, we're going to be good. It was all in. Like, they are making some changes, but I do think we need to see more. I do think this Debo's got to go. He's got to go.
Are they making change, Rob, or are they just firing people?
Well, that's change.
Because you know what I mean? You know what I mean, though, right? Like, are you thinking about what went wrong and trying to fix it and not go into what went wrong last year? Or are you just blaming something and firing it, right? Because let's think about the sequence of hiring these defensive coordinators. It started off with hiring Wilks because they wanted to add something new. Wilks was a great defensive coordinator, in their opinion. He had just not become the head coach after having a great finish to the season with Carolina. It was a great story, blah, blah, blah. And for all the issues they had with Wilks, and they threw him under the bus many times when they had their chance. Remember the call in Minnesota? They blamed the whole game on that one call. They talked about it for 2 weeks. In fact, some say they blamed the Cincinnati game the week after that they lost on that call as well. And they got Wilks out of there. They said all they needed was to just go back to what they know. And so they hired what they know in Nick Sorensen after not wanting it, but they said that's what they wanted to do. And then they brought in the creativity of Brandon Staley. And that goes on for a year. To be fair to both Nick Sorensen and Brandon Staley, they did a horrible job with the defense this offseason.
Yep.
The defense lost this offseason, not coaching. They lost this offseason because the general manager, who is the coach, and the general manager did a terrible job of managing the roster from a finance standpoint on the defense and drafting and putting talent there. And so they had a bad season on defense. They couldn't stop the run. To be fair, that's been a problem for 2 straight years, and they didn't add big people in the offseason. In fact, they got rid of their big run-stopping guy because, hey, they didn't want to pay Armstead anymore. That's part of the business, but they didn't replace him in any capacity, blah, 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 blah. Everybody knows the story, which brings us to this offseason. Again, when the defense is bad, they go to that one change this offseason. They fire them both. And then they go back to Robert Saleh, who was here 2-3 years ago, who was a great defensive coordinator. But if you told us you wanted something new when you hired both Steve Wilks and Brandon Staley, and you wanted to, I'm just so confused on like what part of this is not just trying to get yourself back into a situation where you can try to recreate 2023.
I think that
Saleh wasn't even there, but you know what I mean? Like that culture, that magic that was there when he was there too.
They wanted to get rid of Wilks so bad that they dumped him when the coaching cycle was over because it was the Super Bowl, and they still got rid of him. And then they were left with nothing. So they went with Sorensen and Staley, which was a disaster. But again, right, it seemed like it was an emotional decision. Like, oh, we got to get rid of Wilks. It was all Wilks, bad, bad, bad. I know we didn't score any points in the Super Bowl, but it was Wilks.
You predicted this exactly right? Like, see, I remember your takes from a year ago. But you and I had an argument and I was trying to justify or explain, as I do. Like, I try to explain what I think the 49ers are thinking. I think they're hiring Wilks or Sorensen and Staley for this reason. But your point was, you're not even doing this right, because if you just give it to Staley, hire Staley, give him the shot this year. And so they screwed that up completely, right?
Yes, I said that's really what they wanted to do, but they were too scared to take criticism for it. And so they tried to have a babysitter. I mean, think about it. Think about how it probably worked. And we're kind of veering off the path here, but whatever. Staley's there to babysit Sorensen, right? I would imagine they were like, all right, Nick, go do the game plans. He comes up with the game plan, and I bet they have, okay, give it to Brandon Staley. Okay, then Brandon Staley looks at it. Okay, well, all right, it's maybe change this, and then now we'll give it to Kyle to look over. Like, think about that process, how that probably worked. It was so bad, Kyle gave up play calling in the preseason to listen to Nick Sorensen on the headset. Remember, that was a thing that happened? Like, that should have been our indicator that the 49ers did not make a good decision here, and now they've got to figure this out with Deebo, right? Like, you have to get back on track.
Doesn't blaming all their issues, and maybe I'm not giving it enough attention, but I feel like there's too many things that happen in a football season for everything to culminate in us saying the biggest change with the 49ers is now they have more responsibility on defense. So now Kyle can go back to focusing on the offense fully in all this. Like, I still think the game management issues that persisted, like, I think when we look at the 49ers season like that, and we're not thinking about what actually happened game by game, we're forgetting that, damn, they should have been in the playoffs this year. Despite all of this, despite this random issue that we're blaming, there were situations in games where this issue was not the reason why they lost. Shanahan was calling the freaking plays. Shanahan was making dumb game decisions.
They lost the game against the Rams. They lost the first game in week 3. They never should have lost that game. I know there were circumstances.
Arizona game, the Seattle game.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened too many times this year, quite frankly. There were multiple games. The Miami game. I mean, yeah, the coaching and the execution and the on-field stuff separate from all this other stuff. You're right. Like, they could have
on offense too. And maybe, it's because Shanahan's not focused enough on being detailed or whatever. But they've not been that detailed when Shanahan's been fully focused on the offense. Like, we've seen them lose games like this when Robert Saleh was there and D'Amico Ryans was there. The difference was they were more talented to overcome it. They weren't that talented last year. And who said they weren't that talented before the season?
Me. You.
Thank you.
We were on
giving me credit, man. I always remember your takes from a year ago.
I mean, I'm going to give myself credit before you for obvious reasons. Let's be honest. So, yeah, that's going to be the referendum for me is, does Kyle Shanahan get over his man love for Deebo Samuel and just admit to himself the reality of the situation? It's not 2021 anymore. It's not. It's over, Kyle. It is over. And he's got to see that. And so it cannot be option 3 for Deebo. It can't be, we're not trading him because no one's going to give us anything because he stinks now and the whole league knows it. And we're not cutting him because I love him. So he's just going to play. Because, like, the last thing you want is a unmotivated, disgruntled Deebo Samuel. Because then what kind of a player are you going to get?
I think they need that. I think they need to get rid of, and this is what we talked about last week, right? Why the Rams are getting rid of Cooper Kupp. They need to get rid of, he was that. He still thinks he's that. He's not really that. But remember what we were and remember what I was. Like, they need that completely out of here. It's not that Deebo is still, he can maybe still have moments where he looks like the old Deebo, right? The Dolphins game. You and I just talked about this earlier in the show. I was arguing. He has these moments where he still looks like, you're like, he doesn't look like that anymore. The point is, he has moments where Superman can still put on the cape, but it doesn't happen as frequently anymore. That's what happens when athletes get old. And so that's where I think they need to get rid of it. And they need to let new guys establish this culture, Rob. They have a new culture ready to be established. They have what is he, 26? They have a 25-year-old quarterback they're about to pay. This should be a young team. There should be no Kyle Juszczyk telling people about getting a pay cut at every moment. There should be no Deebo Samuel, causing all of this. This should be a young team.
Kyle Juszczyk should be gone. Deebo should absolutely be gone. Jake Moody should be gone, although he's further down on their list of problems. Yeah, the culture should be Brock. It should be Kittle. It should be Lenore.
Kittle should be the holdover to help you establish the new culture. You have Nick Bosa, who's the professional's professional. Christian McCaffrey, who's a veteran who can establish culture. Trent Williams, who's the absolute professional. It's not like this team is bereft of veterans to establish a culture, especially veterans who are there.
I agree. The new era has to begin, and it can't. I said this when Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance were there. I said, you can't move the new girlfriend into the apartment when the old girlfriend is still living there. It's the same thing with this. You got to clear out the culture setters of the old era and allow the ones that you have. And I agree with you. They have guys on the roster that can do it. Diamondor Lenore is begging to do it.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
Brandon Ayuk.
I agree. And maybe they will. Maybe they will make those changes, and that would be a breath of fresh air. I got to tell you. And I think of that Lions game this year, Fish. The Lions game. They went up and down the field against the Lions. They cooked. Deebo Samuel was not a part of it at all. Had no touches. They didn't need him. They don't need him.
And we saw like enough moments from Ricky Pearsall, I feel like last year, where he should get it. He's going to get his shot, obviously.
Yeah.
And I hope the problem with the 49ers is when they give their rookie the shot, it's like, we're giving you everything. Like the whole road is yours. If you fail, like it's over for you. But this is like your one shot. And some people take it and they go to the moon. And that's Deebo Samuel. And some people are Dante Pettis and they fall off the high rope. Or they're Trey Lance and it's all too much right away, too fast, right? Like there's moments where there's certain athletes, because Drake Jackson, another example, they gave him the full shot. He completely flopped, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's some that take advantage of it. Ricky Pearsall, I think, will be ready for that moment. I think it sucks that it's basically a all or nothing shot when it comes to the 49ers. And it's like next year they're going to open up it and it's going to be there for Ricky Pearsall. But to me, he showed enough, Rob, at the end of last year where they should feel excited. There should be no need for a Deebo Samuel. Let's see how this team looks with Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk lining up on the outside.
They had the same number of receiving touchdowns, and Ricky Pearsall got shot through the chest before the season began. Like, yeah, they should definitely make the transition. Daza 0187, YouTube channel member, says the Niners should have traded Deebo last year when he had value. I completely agree. I've been down on Deebo for a while. I was not buying the skinny Deebo stuff in training camp. There's always a best shape of his life guy in training camp. He never works out to be good, ever.
Right.
So I was down and ready to trade him. Did you see the clip from Debo's podcast, Vish?
No, I never see the clip from Debo's podcast.
Well, he talked about possible trades and possible trade destinations, and I thought it was interesting. Let me see if I can bring up the clip here right now. This is from the Cleats and Convos podcast on Bleacher Report. There we go. Finally, I can figure out how to work a computer. Here's Deebo talking about the Broncos.
Who's a team, in your opinion, that people should kind of be like, ooh, they might be something special?
I could say Denver. Bo Nix is playing really, really good ball right now. Your defense is outrageous. You got P2 out there who's, I would say, the best at the position right now. Probably been for the past 2 years. You got the other guy on the other side. I just think you need a couple more pieces, and then it'll be what it need to be, and just have to get past Pat Mahomes every year.
Who's a team, in your opinion?
That's probably who's interested in him.
Of course it's who's interested in.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this earlier. I put out a YouTube short earlier today with some possible destinations I thought would work with Deebo Samuel. Number one on my list, and I swear I hadn't seen that clip, was Denver.
I think he would want to go there too.
Sean Payton loves the short passing game. That's where Bo Nix excels. Sean Payton loves gadget guys. Remember Taysom Hill? He friggin' loved Taysom Hill. I think Sean Payton knows.
Sean Payton loves the screen game. Who has more screens than Sean Payton?
I think Deebo's exactly the type of player. And I think Payton says, I bet if we offer them a 5, they do it. And to get that potentially for a 5th round pick, I think it makes all the sense in the world for the Niners. You trade him to the AFC. Like, Denver is my number one spot with a bullet for Deebo Samuel.
I agree with you. And I'll say this. The big if is if he still has that in him where he will do the extra things. Because he can still be good, but he can be great if he does the extra things, which is the running, right? And being in shape and looking like what he did like in 2021. Because he's a special talent. Not many players can do what he did over the course of a season or what he can do in individual games. He can be really good for them because they have deep speed, which the 49ers haven't really had around him with Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. So they're going to be able to stretch the field. And dude, Bo Nix threw the ball down the field in Oregon. I didn't know how that was going to translate in the NFL. Shock of the year. Bo Nix throws freaking bombs. They have Cortland Sutton. They have a nice, true, big-bodied possession receiver to complement him. I think Sutton's actually a free agent. And so when I see it like this, I think he has a really good opportunity with what you described with Sean Payton to have a really good year for them.
I think that Denver's an option. I think Pittsburgh potentially is an option because they already have their downfield guy with George Pickens. I think
He's
Tomlin,
not their kind of guy, though.
I don't know. I think Tomlin and
They
Deebo
like guys who can go vertical.
might get along.
Oh, that's a good point. Good point.
I think that potentially Washington or Miami, somebody that knows Deebo, right? Adam Peters or Mike McDaniel, would they potentially have interest? It's just something that crossed my mind. Matt Mayoko does have a column up on NBCSportsBayArea.com. Top 5 Deebo Samuel destinations. He has the Bills on there. I don't know if they're in any particular order, but he has the Bills, Chargers, Commanders, Steelers, and Texans. And that'd be another 49ers connection with D'Amico Ryans there. Any of those potentially, ring a bell for you?
Nah, I don't like the Bills. That one doesn't really make sense to me. I'm thinking I like your suggestion of the Commanders, and I understand the Texans, but I like your suggestion of the Commanders and Broncos because I think the kind of team that needs Deebo is a younger team that their fans are recently excited about, and they'll look at Deebo as we're getting a star. And I don't know that a team that's on the brink or a team that's been in the playoffs would look at taking Deebo like they're getting a star. But Denver would look at Deebo and they would think, one, he's going to bring some additional seats because we got Deebo. He's a guy fans are going to be excited about. And then two, like we could market him and utilize him in a way that it would feel like to our fans we got a star this offseason. Washington's another one. But if he goes to Texans, man, he's still what, the fourth option, the third option? He's not better than Nico Collins. He's not going to get more touches than Joe Mixon, please. He's not better than Dalton Schultz if he comes back.
He's a third option on any team. That's the problem. That's what he's played like. Ray McLeod had more receiving yards than Deebo Samuel this year. Like
you've been waiting to use that the whole show.
I mean, I wrote it down earlier, but it just popped back into my head. Like that's a real fact. That's what Deebo is. But I just hope that Kyle. I had heard that.
What about Atlanta? Speaking of Ray McLeod,
great. Who cares? Great, Atlanta, great. I had heard that Kyle was very cutthroat when it came to players, that he was almost Belichickian like that. It doesn't seem that way to me, Vish, because I can't name like a guy that he's loved that they've gotten rid of. I think he liked Armstead, but he didn't draft Armstead. Armstead was there when they got there. Who's the guy that he brought in that he has said, get the bleep out, I'm done with you?
Trey Lance.
And Jimmy.
Dante Pettis.
I guess, but like,
I think, Rob, I think what we're realizing with Kyle is he's like that with some players. And I don't mean that in the sense that he treats them differently, like he treats Dante Pettis differently from how he treats Deebo. Like I'm sure when he handles them as a coach, he kind of coaches them the same. It's how they take the coaching that's built their relationship, all of those kinds of things, but he handles them the same. But I think it's once he feels like he does have a connection with some of these players, he doesn't want to let him go. But if he doesn't build that connection, he doesn't care. And I think where Belichick was different is Belichick never had an issue when it was time to say goodbye to Richard Seymour, and when it was time to say goodbye to Mike Vrabel, and it was time to say goodbye to Willie McGinnis, and it was time to say goodbye to Brewski. They transitioned through that team. We see, teams who have done it. Pete Carroll, the Seahawks did transition with Russell Wilson, who was
they chose
they transitioned, but they had two different iterations of teams, right? They transitioned away from the defense, and they were able to get those guys out. The Rams with McVay, now they have had Stafford, but they've managed to do it. Like, this is a thing that the 49ers should be able to do. Even the Eagles did it, man.
The Rams signed Goff and then shipped his ass out of town. Absolutely.
Right.
Did it. Yeah. No, they took the biggest cap hit ever to get rid of Jared Goff. So, yeah, no, they have done it. Kyle doesn't seem like he wants to move on. And I would just love to sit down with him and ask him that. Like, that would be my number one question, would be like, what the hell is going on? Why can't you see it? Like, we've talked about it.
Give him a second shot at the 2024 Super Bowl, man. Give him a second shot at the game.
It feels like he's been working to get back to 2019 ever since it happened. Honestly, to me, it does. He wants to get back to that 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. If I could just do it again, I know I can get it right this time. It's like that is fun, man. And I was going through it last night, Vish, because everybody was talking about the Eagles. Oh, They finally overcame it. They got back and they won. And all I could think of was they would be saying all that stuff about the 49ers if they had won that second game, right? That's what it would have been. The Eagles were living the life the 49ers should have lived in 2023.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, the Eagles defense was a lot better, but in a lot of ways, the Chiefs were better this year than they were last year.
Oh, God.
That was the worst Chiefs team, man.
They should not have won as many games as they did. Mahomes was bailing them out of stuff, and it finally came crashing down. And
It wasn't just Mahomes bailing them out. Their defense was doing Houdini. I mean, the one difference was the defense was better. They had L'Jarius Sneed, which was a big difference maker. And we saw that yesterday, right? Because they they could only play McDuffie on Brown, which they couldn't cover Smith. And Jalen Watson's a good player, but Smith is different.
Smith is awesome.
He runs by everybody.
And it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs do this offseason. And now we're going to talk about a Super Bowl hangover with the Chiefs. And will they be, like, if they go right back to the Super Bowl, that's another indictment of Kyle Shanahan, right? Because it's like, oh, the Niners had a Super Bowl hangover.
The Super Bowl hangover is for teams that don't have Mahomes or Josh Allen or Brady.
See. Nobody wanted to say this. Patrick Mahomes may be done winning Super Bowls. Like, I know everyone thinks he's going to get right back. No, he may be done. He's got 3. Only 2 other guys or 3 other guys have more than that. Like, what do we? He may be done.
I think the difference is, though, they've owned the other guys in the AFC where they're kind of in the heads of the Baltimores and the Buffaloes. Because, look, Philadelphia was a uniquely, amazingly talented team. But, dude, Baltimore had enough talent in the last 2 years where they could have been able to run up the score once on Kansas City like this. But that game gets to them. That moment, that timing, all of it. And yesterday, it did get to Mahomes, dude. We saw that for the first time. I think he felt that, oh, my God, if I win this game, I'm going to be called the greatest quarterback of all time. And he played like crap.
Well, last thing, because I got to run to do a Bleacher Report stream. But it did give me a little hope that the philosophy of the 49ers on defense can still work, right? Pressure with 4, they completely discombobulated Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid to the point where they couldn't even run a screen pass. They were so out of it.
You know what doesn't need to happen, though? Don't go sign Milton Williams this offseason. That's Dana Stubblefield playing next to Jalen Carter, who's Bryant Young.
Right. Yeah. Don't sign anybody that plays next to Chris Jones ever, please.
Yeah. This is like when they signed Hargrave, who played next to Fletcher Cox. Well, they got rid of Fletcher Cox and drafted Fletcher Cox. So it's lucky that.
Kyle said it. If you got the horses, the defensive philosophy can work. Yeah, great. The problem is you're 4 horses short of a stable here. Like you have 1 horse.
Go get him, man. Go get him.
Oh, God. We will see. We will see.
This is what the Niners D-line could have done last year. You could have got – this is – dude, Kasaric, man, you could – like – Chase Young played pretty well for the Saints last year. Like you could have gotten, you couldn't get these guys up for this game. Look at how hungry the Eagles defensive line was. Where's all the yelling from Chris Kasaric and Darryl Tapp? They hype it up every offseason. Does that look like, do the Niners defensive line look like they're playing with the same hunger as Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and all these kinds of guys? And
apparently, only the defensive coordinator can cheer and get people up. If anyone else does it, it doesn't work. I'm kidding, of course.
Dude, you're paying, if you're Jed York, you're paying $1 million to that guy to yell at your defensive line week after week. I think you're just paying because he's blowing out his throat. And then when he retires, Jed York has accumulated the bills for his throat surgeries.
Well, regardless of what happens, we will be here with you through it all. Give us a like and a subscribe, please. We're live every single weekday. We're live after all Niners breaking news. Big decisions coming for the 49ers, not only with Deebo Samuel. We didn't even talk about Brock Purdy. That's a whole other ball of wax. Jed York did just tell Josh Dubow of the AP that they want Brock around for a long time and they think they're going to get it done. So all signs seem to indicate that that is happening. But when and how are going to be key details, and we'll be here with you breaking it all down. Vish, you are the absolute best, man. I wish we could do a 2-hour show.
We will one day.
One day. Until then, we'll talk to you next week.